Welcome to the What If podcast with your hosts, Spencer Worth Davis and Ryan Copperrood.
Goddamn right.
I said I'll make you say, phenomenon. Yeah.
This ain't no motherfucking Pete.
This is the What If podcast, though. Hi, Spencer.
Hey, bruv.
What's happening?
I watched one episode of Stranger Things last night.
I've watched 0.
Ooh, I might watch 7 more of them as soon as we're done recording.
That's real. Is it 8 total?
Or no, sorry, it's 9 this season.
Ooh.
We get an extra one for some reason.
Tight. I'll probably do 4 today and 5 tomorrow. It will be done by Monday.
I gotta do some traveling this week, so I was thinking maybe I'd just download a bunch of them and watch them on my flight.
Can you download them off of Netflix, though?
You can download some things on Netflix.
Yeah, but
is that not one of them?
I would imagine it's not in their downloadable content.
Ass! That sucks.
Someone has them on a BitTorrent right now, but we do not condone that behavior, guys.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, we're yelling about the phenomenon today because we're talking about the Ariel Phenomenon.
Yeah. So it's 2 things. The Ariel UFO incident happened in 1994 at a school in Zimbabwe. We'll tell you that story in just a moment.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a film called Ariel Phenomenon that's being finished. It's in post-production right now, hopefully for a release early 2018, by a man named Randall Nickerson, who actually we have on the show today.
Hey, thank you, Randall, for carving out some time. Randall's on the East Coast and hopped on a call with us today, and we got to ask him some questions about the movie he's making about the incident that he has been working on for 10 years now, which is it sounds like a crazy long time, and it is a crazy long time, but you kind of, when you get into the interview, you'll see why it has been such an extensive project and all the lengths that he's gone through to do his best to tell, I would say, the most encompassing version of a pretty strange story.
Yeah, let's...
Should we dive right into that pretty strange story?
Sure.
All right.
So it was September 16th of 1994, about 10:30 in the morning, Friday morning, at the Ariel School in Ruwa, Zimbabwe.
That's Ruwa, Zimbabwe.
Yes, it is. There were 60-some children who were out at recess playing on the playground, schoolyard.
Well, we found out from Randall probably more than that, actually.
At least 62.
Yeah.
Possibly more than 62.
Closer to maybe 100, as he said, but yeah.
And they were out at recess that morning, and they witnessed a silver craft of some kind, come down from the sky and land in this open field behind their playground at their school. And after the craft landed, they saw a small, about 4 foot tall being get out of this craft, dressed in all black, sort of like a black jumpsuit or like a wetsuit, with long hair. And this being walked around the craft, on top of the craft, and then just sort of stood in this field and stared at some of the kids for a while.
Mm-hmm.
They describe it as sort of being like your traditional gray alien with a large head and large black eyes that were slanted kind of down towards the center of its face.
Yep.
About 4 feet tall. And some of the students who made prolonged eye contact with this being claimed to have gotten a message telepathically from it, mostly about how we weren't taking care of our planet and bad things were going to happen if we didn't start taking better care of our planet.
And we should just clarify really quickly. It sounds like Spencer is like a sideline reporter just being like, here's what happened at the game today. But we know all of this stuff because the kids have firsthand accounts of this stuff. So this isn't like some of the other stories we've told you before where it's like, and then the Navy destroyer disappeared.
Right,
and
they found Antarctic Bigfoot in the cave.
Yeah. We have told you guys some stories that come from that lens that are a little bit more like conjecture-y. And
this is the best documented story we've probably discussed on here.
Yeah, that's probably pretty real. But yeah, all of these details come from firsthand accounts.
So the kids, and this is the one hole in the story that I've never gotten a great answer to.
Sure.
At some point, the kids went back inside.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they just turned and went back inside and left the alien and his spaceship out on the playground.
Right. Well, that was weird. Come on, guys.
I'm sure he's fine.
Time for geometry.
Or if he got back in and flew away and then they went inside.
Yeah.
But the students right away started telling, there were no adults that witnessed this at the time. They were all of the teachers were in a faculty meeting, and apparently their policy was to just let the 100 kids outside by themselves for recess with no one supervising them.
Yeah, I mean, it's rural Zimbabwe. There's probably no creatures that could possibly harm any of those children outdoors.
So none of the adults at the school witnessed what the students witnessed, which for some people is a problem with this story, but
we heard later, though, from Randall that there may potentially have been firsthand witnesses from other locations who saw something similar, but we'll see.
The students went inside and some of them immediately started telling their teachers and other adults about what they had seen, and they were basically told, like, shut up, go to class. And it wasn't until the next day or overnight when many, many parents called the school saying, hey, what the hell happened at school today? Because my kid says he met a telepathic alien who told him the world was going to end. Would you care to elaborate on that? That then the next day, the school started taking it more seriously. There was a woman named Cynthia Hind who got involved, I think, within a matter of days to interview. She was a MUFON researcher working in Africa, throughout Southern Africa.
Yeah.
And she interviewed a lot of the students, took initial reports from a lot of them. The BBC got involved and did some coverage of the incident and talking to the kids. And a couple months later, John Mack, UFO abductee researcher from Harvard, who's also a child psychiatrist, came to the school in Zimbabwe to interview the kids and sort of gather more information about what happened.
And filmed a bunch of it.
Yeah, and there's, both from Cynthia Hind's interviews and the BBC's footage and John Mack's footage, there's a ton of archival footage out there that some of it's available on YouTube and other sources. And Randall actually was saying that he got access to many, many, many hours of that footage for the documentary that he's working on. But so all told, there were 62 separate eyewitness reports of this event, and they're all fairly similar in terms of most of them saw some sort of craft, most of them saw it land, most of them saw this being get out, and then there are variations on that story depending on which kid saw it and from what angle and what their personal experience was from it.
Right.
So that was the story from September 16th, 1994. In 2008, Randall, who we're going to be speaking to in a minute, got involved when the John Mack Institute, Mack passed away in 2004, but his institution keeps some of his research and work going, approached Randall about doing a film around this incident and some of the archival footage that they had available to them.
Yeah, you can, if your current situation lends itself, you can go to arielphenomenon.com and you can learn a little bit more about the film itself and kind of the story that's being told. I mean, granted, we told you the Cliff's Notes version right now. The cool thing about the Ariel Phenomenon documentary is that Randall and his team have gone back now to, well, not even gone back, sought out the kids from this incident and interviewed many of them 20 years later to ask them how this incident changed their life, or if it changed their life, who they've become because of it, or if it even shaped that at all. And also gotten a lot of their retellings of the stories, as we talked about, mid to late 20s or even like early 30s now kids, or excuse me, adults, retelling the story of what happened to them as they were kids. And so it's a pretty interesting angle on, not just the story itself and getting a telling of the story itself, but also the long-term arc of the story and what it did or didn't become and how it shaped people through their experience. So it seems like a really cool film. They've got an Indiegogo going to raise a little bit of money to finish the edit for the film, but there are trailers you can watch online. You can find the Indiegogo and the trailers and all that stuff on their website at arielphenomenon.com. But we were pretty excited to talk to Randall and hear kind of his take on the process and the film and the meetings that he's had and the interviews he's done and kind of ultimately what that's going to become.
Cool. Let's dive into the interview and we'll see y'all on the other side.
My name is Randall Nickerson. I'm the director, the producer, cameraman, soundman, I mean, literally everything down the list. The film is called Ariel Phenomenon. I've been working on it for a long time, and it's finally getting toward completion. This film is about an incident that took place in Africa in 1994 at a school in rural Zimbabwe, and where they had witnessed this craft land, some kind of craft land behind this school, and two beings get out of some kind. That's kind of the story, basics of the story, but what made it a story was it was covered by the BBC, it was covered by a whole bunch of different news organizations at the time. Otherwise, we would have probably never heard about this. And then it was also Dr. John Mack, psychiatrist at Harvard went over there and actually interviewed the witnesses. Mostly they were children. I mean, at the playground, at the school this happened, it was all children that witnessed this. So that's kind of the wrap. It's a feature documentary, and I can't even, I can't wait for people to see it because it's such a riveting story. It's just, man, it's good.
We're excited too. We've seen the trailers for going on, I guess, I don't know, we first talked about this on the show almost a year ago now, so.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So we're excited to see it too, and excited to definitely be able to share your film and the story with our listeners as well. Randall, can you tell us, when do you remember being the first time you heard about the incident and kind of what got you into the story itself?
I was friends with a friend of Dr. John Mack, and I remember just vaguely hearing about it and seeing a couple video clips, and he did a sightings program early on. It was right after he got back from Africa. And I saw the interviews on that, and I was like, wow, I don't know what they saw, but I was pretty impressed. It was after John Mack died, a really close friend of his approached me and said, would you be interested? Because I had just made my first 16-minute film. And I showed her, and she said, hey, would you be interested in this footage? So that kind of kicked it off, and I looked at the footage, and I was like, well, this is very interesting. But I also felt like I need to know more. I was supposed to do a DVD of just John Mack interviewing these kids, but I had too many questions. You know, like the BBC reporter, you've got to have 3 sources to go with a story. And so I kept finding more sources and more material, and I couldn't believe, there's a consistency about this story that is, it's fascinating, very fascinating to me.
I think that's one of the most interesting parts about the whole story to me is so in doing this film, you've interviewed some of the students that were there that day, correct?
Yes, yeah.
And now it's, 20 some years later.
Yep.
I think one of the most interesting parts is their stories have remained fairly consistent over 20 years. And it's obviously an experience and a moment that had a huge impact on them throughout their lives. And we've talked on the show before about like, what would happen if you had an experience like this with seeing a UFO, or in their case, seeing an actual being, and some of them claim to have telepathic or some sort of interactions with this being. How does that affect your life on a personal level, on a psychological level, on a philosophical or spiritual level? What's been your take on that, having interviewed a lot of those people 20 years down the road?
It varies. It really varies a lot by the individual and how they were brought up, or what their religious beliefs were, or their family, and even other people that I've interviewed along the way in my research into this whole phenomenon. There's definitely a post-traumatic stress of seeing something that you have never seen before. That seems to be consistent. I mean, it's just, from what I understand, blows people's minds. It's like, it's not supposed to be real. It's not, these things aren't supposed to happen. And seeing another creature you've never seen before, or technology you've never seen before, it does have a profound effect. It just brings up so many questions. It doesn't bring up answers. It brings up tons and tons of questions. And that's what a lot of times when I'm talking to people or interviewing them, I'm like, you wouldn't be, if this was some story or whatever, you'd be trying to make sense of it, which they are, trying to make sense of everything, but you're just left with so many questions. That's my take. And some people are really traumatized. I mean, there were definitely some of these witnesses that were really traumatized, and some not, which is fascinating to me. Like this playground too. Some of the kids, what the age they were, like the younger kids, how they were affected. Some of the older kids were affected even more. So I've been looking at all that also. It's just the ages and the adult, witnesses were pretty shocked. They weren't at the school itself, but around the school, there was an airline pilot. That was 3 of them actually in the air at the time, the night before, and a woman in the morning who lived near the school also. So pretty much shock. Their take. Now they didn't have the kind of experience that these kids have, closer contact, but it's still seeing something that you just don't have the answers or even the vocabulary to explain what you see. Like, you know what I mean?
In listening through some of the interviews with the kids from, I think it must have been that BBC footage, some of that is available online, hearing their descriptions of it and how they all sort of saw a similar or the same versions of the same thing, but how it affected them, and even in that moment, some of them said, I was scared, I wasn't scared, I wanted to help the other kids, I was, just sort of entranced by looking at this being itself. Some of them mentioned getting actually some sort of communication from the being in regards to taking care of our planet and so on and so forth. And just even in that moment, the range of experiences from observing what they all described as essentially the same event.
Yeah.
And in the retelling too, I think that was one of the things that struck me was some of the kids get almost teary and kind of like anxious when they're being asked questions about it by John. And then some of them are almost like kind of excited and kind of grinny and,
that's true.
Excited to tell what they saw. And that range of reactions and emotions is really fascinating.
You mentioned that there were other sightings before and I think after the incident at Ariel School, right?
That's true.
Were you able to speak to any of those witnesses?
Yes.
Okay.
Quite a few of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it just, I know there's this whole argument. Yeah, there were kids on a playground kind of thing, but that was my question too. I also had a question about, well, okay, but did anybody else see this thing? And then I actually got on some radio programs in Africa through the help of a wonderful reporter there, and put out the word, like, this thing happened in '94. If you had seen anything at that time, could you please, contact me? And I got a lot of calls and a lot of emails. And it just impressed me that, particularly the pilots, I got to say, because there were 3 of them, and that impressed me. They were at 25,000 feet the night before, and they all remember this ball of light coming across the front of their aircraft. And yeah, they're still talking about it. So, I mean, he took a risk to even go on camera with me.
Sure.
The one particular one. So, and then other people that were in the surrounding area, even at other schools, like high schools, because it was during the daytime. And this one man who was in a school about 50 miles away from Ariel described, he just saw the thing fly by this school, really low altitude, silver thing, no wings, no nothing. That's exactly what he said. Shiny silver thing. That's his exact words. He said, and I said, did it make any noise? And no, it didn't make any noise whatsoever. Yeah, so something went down there. I don't know quite what. I'm a kind of person where it's like, okay, I like to be there to see it myself. And then I'm like, it happened.
Right. But
there's so many little details. I mean, the story's consistent. Their versions are a little bit different, but that's normal. That's actually gives it more credibility, because they're talking about something. And even, this is something that really got me, was body language. Like, I don't know if you ever seen one of the witnesses, she starts talking about it and her nostrils flare.
I don't think I've seen that one.
And that little sign was like, it was a sign of fear of it, this body, she didn't even want to think about it. I also noticed, I trust the archival more than anything, because I've got tons of it.
Sure.
Because it was closer to the incident time. Yeah, there was another thing too, was, they were talking about this. They weren't looking at each other to make sure the story was straight. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they were just telling the story. They weren't looking at other kids and saying, "Oh, do we get the story together?"
Yeah.
They were talking about something they experienced.
Right.
So that's evident throughout all the archival. So there's a ton of it. I know. It's unfortunately, I can't put it all in the film. There's so much archival, but it's fascinating.
The initial John Mack was not on site right away, right? He came in December. Okay.
So he came, and this incident happened on September 16th. Yeah, and he got a call from the BBC reporter.
Well, Mary Hind was involved in the initial report.
Cynthia Hind.
Cynthia Hind, I'm sorry, yeah.
Cynthia Hind, yeah.
And so
she was a MUFON.
Yeah, and she was on site, right? Like within a few days, is that correct?
4 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you reference the archival footage, are you talking about, because they filmed some of her interviews with the kids too, right?
True. Yes.
So do you have that and Mack's footage, or are you referencing mostly Mack's?
There's even more than that.
Oh, wow.
I've got 6 sources of footage, and yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, just the fact that it exists and people actually paid attention, and
right,
it's incredible. I think I've said it before. It's like I don't think there's ever been an event that's been so documented right after the fact. Because BBC was there, Cynthia Hind was there the day after, 2 News, the Zimbabwe TV was there the week after, and there's just all these news outlets were covering it. So.
Randall, do you have any plans to, once the documentary is released, do you have any plans to release any more of that footage that you have, either online or anything like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's probably, it's just fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I have so much footage that I could make another entire movie.
Yeah, I bet.
Easily.
I'm sure there'd be a lot of people who would be fascinated to go through some of the nuance of all of the details around some of those multiple sources, and that could be a really cool thing after the actual documentary comes out to be able to kind of pick through and see some of those additional pieces that had to unfortunately end up on the cutting room floor, but we don't all have a 10-hour movie in us.
Right. I know, right? Totally. Hey? Yeah, it's a lot. Once the film comes out, and then I'm going to try to address that, because I just want to get the story out as what this how it actually went down, the whole thing, and then I can start getting more into detail with things online. Or I'm not even sure. I don't know what's going to happen once it's so many things to do. Get done. And
I wanted to talk a little bit about the being that was seen outside of or on top of or near the craft, depending on who you ask. Because there have been other mass UFO sightings in the past, but I've never come across one where this many people, it was 60 plus kids, right?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I think it was more than that, because they never interviewed the grade 1s and 2s, and I've had them approach me.
Okay.
They were in grade 1 or 2. They kept the grade 1s and 2s out of the whole thing. Okay. Even though they did see stuff.
So maybe closer to 100 kids?
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
That's probably true. Yeah.
So 60 to 100 kids seeing an actual alien. I mean, I don't think they're, or a being of some kind. I don't know. Could you talk to the descriptions that some of the witnesses gave of that being, or some of the communication that some of them claim to have?
Sure. Well, one of the interesting things for me was okay, they all reported the same, this thing was in black, which was unusual. That I did a lot of research into when was this ever seen before? A creature of that description with a large head, big eyes. Usually it's gray or some other, but black. I was they didn't get that off of the media. That you know what I mean? That was one of my initial thoughts and concerns, and that was consistent from everybody, that it was about 4 foot or 4 feet high. It was short. It was the size of a grade 6 kid. That's how a lot of them describe it.
Oh.
But very large head, black, kind of in a diver's type of suit, skin tight, really shiny suit. Mm-hmm. And, all kinds of descriptions of behavior, which that'll be in the film. I don't want to talk about that yet, but just little details that how the heck could they get, again, it just speaks to, they watched this thing really carefully and saw, we're describing how it behaved in a way, physically. So the story itself is really consistent in that way. Some reported it, that one had hair and the other one did not. And that, there was one at least on top of the silver craft or whatever.
Even that detail I find really interesting. Like I don't know if another case where a being is said to be walking around on top of the craft.
Yeah, I haven't either.
These little unique tidbits that come out that make this whole story so much more interesting.
And to your point from earlier, Randall, the it's not just the unique tidbits themselves; it's the unique tidbits in tandem with how many kids recite some of those unique tidbits too.
Yeah,
you know, like even in I think your first trailer that I saw, there's 2 or 3 different kids who mentioned the running around or moving back and forth or whatever, like, which is just so fascinating because if one kid were to invent a detail, that would be one thing. But the fact that multiple different kids in multiple different situations are reciting these very specific behaviors and actions is just kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. Some of the kids, talked about getting a message that, like time stopped and that everything, that some, got the message of stuff we were doing to the earth. And I found out through this research that that's pretty common for people that encounter these things, that and I don't know what that comes from. I kind of wonder, like, well, is that just how a human being reacts when another species that's of a higher order, maybe when we pick up a mouse in its cage or whatever and put it back, they like start thinking about their cage. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
sure.
I don't know where that comes from, but it was definitely, it wasn't all the kids by any long shot. It was a handful of them that received it. They were close to it, and it seemed to have had something to do with the eye contact with that creature. There was one that approached, from all that I've gathered, that approached the field toward them. I don't know what to make of it exactly. It's interesting that it's consistent with some other reports that have happened in Japan and other countries, and I just think about how important it is to, like, we should be paying attention to these things.
Yeah. It's even if you don't know what it is, it's not nothing.
Yeah,
exactly. It's not just there's too much to it to dismiss, and man, it's important. If that's really going on, that's pretty damn important. Like, we should pay attention. And it's just amazing how quiet, our space program is, and like the military about stuff like this. I'm not like talking conspiratorially. I just feel like that's a big deal, and it could happen at any point. Some other species possibly could come out of space and just land.
Right.
What's the plan for that? I'd like to know.
Yeah.
You would think there has to be one at this point.
I would think so. And if that's been going on already for a long time, then they're way, way smarter than us to sort of get around the being seen.
Or really, just to get here in the first place.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I think we're going to learn that's not a big deal. I mean, we're already, we're talking about, folding space and time, and that's a big argument that people make, but I think we're just so young. We haven't even got off the planet, out of our solar system yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to figure it out, how to get to these planets that we're discovering every day. But it's going to take some time. But somebody else that's already been around for, who knows, maybe 1 billion years longer than us, they figured out a lot of stuff, I would imagine.
A lot of stuff that we probably can't even comprehend yet.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the message that some of the kids received for a second. Did that come up in Cynthia Hind's interviews with the kids? Because I know that was something that John Mack had written about and talked about in the past, is some of the other abductees that he had worked with receiving this similar sort of message. And it seemed like he at least partially bought into that concept of...
Yeah, I agree.
Is that something that maybe could have been partially influenced by Mack's questioning of the kids, or was that there prior to him talking to them?
Well, I think it was there prior to talking to him by 2 witnesses that were interviewed a week after the event, where they were asked what it meant. They were asked, "Why do you think they're here?" A reporter asked some actually really good questions. Mm-hmm. Like, why do you think they came? So it was there, but nobody really. And the thing with Mack's interviews was he asked really deep, detailed questions because he was a child psychoanalyst for 40 years. He was really good. He came in with questions because he'd already been researching this. So he already somewhat, well, I think at that point was like, something is going on here. Mm-hmm. And I felt, there was a little bit of, it's a little bit, leading here. But in general, even I found like in his interviews that he was shocked in several situations of what came out of these kids' mouths, particularly around the message thing, because he just didn't expect it, I guess, from kids. It was different. Yeah, I can't imagine. That's just anyway. I hope that answered your question. I got
no, definitely.
I've had to look at everything really carefully, and just the BBC reporter was really skeptical when he showed up on the scene. He was really skeptical, and it's interesting how it affected his life and how he changed his mind. How after being there for 2 days and then he came back a few times. It blew his mind. He says that a lot. He kept saying when I interviewed him, he's like, blew my mind. Never even thought about it. Yeah.
That was another thing. Like, I think this film has a potential to sort of bring this topic to a larger audience, because as prominent as the whole UFO extraterrestrial concept is in our culture, it still is always relegated to the fringe. It's not taken seriously. Even though if you look at polls and 40 to 50% of Americans think that aliens have been to Earth before.
Yeah.
And yet
totally,
anytime
right?
you bring it up, it's you're crazy and it couldn't possibly be true.
Yeah.
Is that something that you are trying to do with this film, is to sort of bring that more to the mainstream, or to bring a different perspective to that topic?
I am. I'm trying to bring it to, I really want to bring it to the mainstream, and let's start talking about it. Like, I think this is not new. As Dan Aykroyd said it very well, it's like, this is not new. It's been going on for a long time, and there's been reports for a long time. And it is sort of stigmatized and not talked about in the mainstream media. And it is fringe. And I think it's so important that we should start addressing it. And what I'm doing totally differently in this film is not, there's no special effects. There's no bullshit. It's about people. Mm-hmm. It's about people and them as kids and how it's affected their lives. And, and I really appreciate their cooperation, the people that have allowed me to, interview them, and they've been wonderful. And, but yeah, it's about real people. It's not, these kids that have grown up to be successful and smart. I mean, they're all brilliant. I haven't met one that's not really intelligent and normal. I mean, one guy, he works for the British military. He drives tanks.
Wow.
Wow. And, another one's a lawyer. It's like, yeah. So I think it has the potential to, at least for people to say, maybe, or what if. It's funny, the name of your show.
Yeah.
I was thinking of alternatives names for this movie, just, and that was one of my alternative names, was What If. And then like two months later, we get in touch, and I was like, love it. That's the way it happens, cool. Like these synchronistic moments. But yeah, raising the question of, I'm not trying to prove it. I'm trying to just talk about it. And so are these people. They're just, they don't, that the problem is they don't feel like they can be open about it with people without being judged. And that seems to be rampant. And it's like, I don't know how to deal with that. How do we deal with that as a culture? And I think that's shifting, because we've been discovering all these planets, and we're like, oh, okay, there's probably, and the scientists are like, there's definitely life out there.
Right.
But how do we, I guess we're going to grow into it and grow more open-minded. And then I think science at the end of the day is going to start looking back at these reports and say, maybe. And that's partly human ego too. Like, I don't think that we really understand how advanced something else may be,
right?
To get away with things. I think about that a lot. I think about, God, well, obviously they're not here to take something or
they would have.
kill us. Oh, yeah. I don't know. I get into deep thoughts about a lot of stuff around this. And, it's important that I know. I think it's where we're headed. There's probably people on, I don't know, we'll find out, but people on other planets in the universe somewhere and talking about our planet. I was like, yeah, that's the planet that doesn't know that doesn't know we're all out here.
They're still in the dark.
Yeah, they're still in the dark. And that'll be, boy, what a day that'll be. I mean, and there's just too many people that have come forward over time, credible military people, and over and over and over, just as the phenomena itself. There's just been too many people. I've met too many people. I've met so many people that have just told me their story privately and off the record.
Yeah.
Just because, and they had no reason to make it up, and they were just affected and had nowhere to go with it.
And I think that's a really interesting part of this specific story is that none of these, well, then kids, now adults, have anything to gain from any of this.
No.
It's just, it's something that's stuck with them and they want to have out there or want to speak about. And
yeah,
I mean, it sounds like some of them were hesitant to even speak about it 20 years later and publicly.
That's true.
Yeah, I was going to say, in fact, like, if anything, people like this, like you're saying, are, they're successful in good jobs and intelligent people. Like, if anything, they have something to lose by the mockery that is made of some of these stories to come out and talk about their experience. I mean, I think it even comes up in your most recent trailer from this fall, where it's the two girls sitting side by side, and the one says something like, I know what I saw, but it still makes me feel like, and the girl cuts her off and she says something to the effect of, like, you're not crazy. Like, she's like, they're still dealing with that dichotomy in their brains of, I know what I saw, but also it makes me feel crazy, and having to sort of sort that thing out in their minds.
Yeah, it's really common. And, the difference, though, with this, and I've told them, I'm like, if you were an individual coming out and saying this happened, you're going to get a lot of flack. But the fact that they're a large group of people.
Yeah. I'm
actually looking forward to, after the film comes out, of all the people coming. Well, they're going to talk about it.
For sure.
I mean, because there were so many, they can back up each other. It's just, and I think we'll see how that plays out. But I think it's different for them because there were so many of them, and that they was a close-knit school, so they stand up for each other. I've seen that, and we'll see. I'm very fascinated to see what's going to happen when this story comes out.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
The ridicule factor is something that we just, it's something interesting I've noticed too lately. There hasn't been a lot of ridiculing as much as there used to be. There used to be a lot of it. It's sort of, something's changed where some people comment on it, but not like they used to. I wonder if that's because of the scientific discoveries that we're making. And I wonder, and your generation, I don't know, you guys, like, it's totally different for you compared to my generation or my dad's generation. I know my brother's kids and people I know, they grew up with this stuff. Like, yeah, I talk to young people all the time. Like, they have no problem. It's like, yeah, that's probably true. They've seen enough witnesses on TV and read stories online, and it's a different age.
Well, and it's been in pop culture for most of our lives now too. To a degree that it wasn't for earlier generations.
And we also grew up. We also grew up with the internet by the time we were in middle school. So at that point we had access to things like YouTube and documentaries and interviews and things like that. That maybe more so the generation before us only had things like Mars Attacks and some of those. You know what I mean? Like some of those types of.
We had to go out and rent stuff.
Right.
It's also giving people the ability. Also giving people the ability to actually share their stories and realize that they're not the only ones seeing these things, having these experiences, so that we can, in Minnesota, hear about a story from Zimbabwe, the next day. And be able to connect people who have had these experiences over long periods of time and all over the world. And so it's not so isolating as it maybe once was.
Very true. Yeah, it's made the world smaller. When I first went over to Zimbabwe, just a side note, like nobody had cell phones. And when I went back again for the third time in 2015, almost everybody's got cell phones. It's totally changing Africa in a huge way. It's and that's, even when I was researching this, like Facebook just came out around that time, and it changed it allowed me to find these people.
Oh yeah.
And still every day there's somebody new that witnessed something that is just getting on Facebook, and they find me, and it's just amazing.
So you've spent more time with this story and with these people and researching it than probably anyone else in the world at this point.
Oh, by far.
At the end of the day, what is your take? What do you think happened that day?
I think something really unusual happened that day. I believe the reports of the kids. I think what happened is what they say happened. There are question marks for sure. I have, but I know some of the kids went along with the story that after the fact. Not many, but a few. But the way they behave in the interviews, what they describe, the inconsistencies of what they describe too, are additive. Not you know what I mean. It's more detail that somebody else didn't see. Well, one of the interesting things was one of the teachers didn't believe that it happened. This was early on, and I was trying to find skeptics or somebody who didn't believe or had an alternative explanations. And I was hoping he was still like, oh, it's all bullshit. But I went and found him, and he said, he's like, oh shit, he changed his mind. And I was like, what? So you believe them? And he said, yeah. And he said, I would ask him, what changed your mind? He said, the consistency of the reports over time. It's like they didn't change their story over all this time. And this, that was 20 years of time. It's a very, very interesting event. And it was covered really well by a lot of good people who did it right. There's something about this investigation was actually done correctly. I still found when you revisit an investigation, it's fascinating because you're going over all these other people's investigative work. And they did a good job for what they knew at the time, but you still find more details later. You'll find witnesses that never spoke about it. I believe them. I really do. I believe them as adults, and I definitely believe the archival speaks really loudly that this was something that happened that was real. So I wouldn't spend 10 years on it if I didn't think that.
Yeah,
good point.
And it's been a long time. The further I went along, I got Mack's footage, looked at that, and I found the school and all that. And just the further I went, and then I found out it was a BBC war reporter that covered it. I'm like, what? This is such an awesome story.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain that to somebody unless they really see it. So I'm so excited to have people see it because they'll get it. They'll get why I've spent so much time on it. Like I want to get this right. Like I'm going to have one shot at it, and to get this story right. And I wanted to do that. So, and it's also just been a financial major big deal.
Yeah. Speaking of, you guys have an Indiegogo going on for a few more days.
We do.
Right? Where can people find out about that?
Indiegogo.com, and you type in Ariel School documentary or Ariel Phenomenon. Actually, Ariel Phenomenon, and Ariel is spelled ARIEL. Or you can go to our webpage. That'll point you there too. It's arielphenomenon.com. And there's a lot of information there about the case and links and what's going on. But yeah, it's really expensive to make a film.
Yeah.
Are you sort of creating plans once the film is released? Do you think you'll tour it? Do you think you'll do festivals? Are you planning on kind of anything post-release, or are you just sort of focused on the last mile of tying it off so far?
December, we should be in a good place, and definitely going to festivals first. And
Sweet.
We're the top 10s, maybe South by Southwest, even Con. We're thinking about because it's really good. Nothing's ever been done like this on this topic.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that first and then see where it goes. But that's a whole nother job that I have to learn and another hat to wear.
Yeah, definitely.
But I see it going to some big places.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. We're gonna be sure to link in the show notes to arielphenomenon.com and to the Indiegogo and stuff like that.
We really need help.
Yeah,
we really do need the help on this last push.
Yeah, for sure. We're excited to see it come to life, and maybe you'd be down to come back and talk to us after the movie comes out. And
love to. I can share a lot more at that time.
Yeah, perfect.
There's a lot of things I have not. Oh, well, I'm not going to speak about it until the movie's out.
Sure.
Want to spoil it.
Well, once it's out and once we get a chance to see it and everything, we'll have you back on and we'll have another conversation about the whole thing. Rad, man. All right. Well, thanks again for your time. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, man.
Take it easy.
Take care.
Well, all right, man.
That shit is crazy.
Yeah, boy.
Man, shout out to Randy for taking the time today.
Yeah, man. I want to watch it.
Right?
I'm kind of bummed that when he was like, oh, we screened a 3-hour version of the movie. I mean, he's like, we got to cut it down to 90 minutes.
Show me what you got.
Yeah, man. Like, dude, if you have a 3-hour version of this movie, like, we can be kept secret. Like, come on, man.
No, we can't. Well, we would be telling you about it right now if we had seen it. Randy made the right call.
We would just be like, we've seen it and it's tight. You should go support them on Indiegogo. Go.
For real, though, just selfishly, maybe go throw them some money so that I can watch this movie at some point.
Yeah, for real. What do you think, man?
I don't know, dude. Like, I agree that something definitely happened.
Yes.
And I wanted to go down this road when he mentioned, when he was talking about like the kids all sort of had different experiences of what happened that day, or
right.
They all described seeing something similar, but how it affected them was different, and what their takeaway was different for a lot of them. And I was listening to another interview that he did with one of the women who was there that day, one of the students who's now in her 30s. And
was she was like online or something, or
it was on a show called The Unexplained. It's a podcast that Howard Hughes does.
Yeah.
Not that Howard Hughes, a different Howard Hughes.
Pretty sure that Howard Hughes is dead.
Well, exactly. And she was saying, actually, I pulled a quote from it. Let me see if I can find it. All right, here we go. She said, "I knew it was something different, something special. I wasn't sure if the other people around me could see what I was seeing. What I saw wasn't constant. You saw it and then you didn't see it. It was almost like your mind was playing tricks on you." And so to me, that doesn't read as there was a craft and a person got out of it. It almost seems more like, and this was something that John Mack was sort of his description or his take on the whole alien abduction thing, was that it was sort of a derivation of vision that's described throughout history. So that through most of history would have been relayed as some sort of religious experience or vision, that UFO sightings and alien abductions and alien sightings, close encounters, are the present day version of that.
Yes.
And hearing some of these people speak about it as adults, it almost reads as a religious or some sort of spiritual experience in the way that it affected them.
Sure.
And it wasn't necessarily, I saw a spaceship and I saw a man get out of a spaceship. It's a little more nuanced than that sometimes. And I think some of we saw a spaceship and an alien get out of it could have been due to the fact that these kids were all in school together. In that first round of interviews, many of them were interviewed together. They didn't interview each individual kid. So maybe what one kid saw as a spaceship, because that kid was familiar with UFO stuff at the time, another girl sees as, I don't know, there was something kind of blinking out in and out of reality, and I'm not really sure what I saw, but I felt a certain way about it. And another kid describes as these orbs of light. Like, it wasn't... I think my one beef with this story is that if you go back through a lot of the individual accounts, especially the first round of them, it's not as consistent as it's sometimes described as being.
Sure.
Which is not to say that they're making it up, but that maybe let's not immediately jump to aliens in a spaceship.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess like I haven't seen a ton of the older footage of the BBC footage and all that stuff. I think there are, I don't know, the kids seem to be interviewed in like groups of different sizes, including solo with Mack. And I don't know, man. I guess this is kind of the reason that I want to see the movie, though, is because what he's painted and says he's painted and is obvious as to what he's painted in the trailers is it's the fullest version of that story that we can get. So are there some inconsistencies? Sure. You know, and I think too, with what he was saying in the interview about how they didn't even interview the first and second grade kids, it was just third through sixth or third through eighth or whatever it was. 100 kids is a lot of kids to all see the exact same identical thing at the exact same time. But maybe 20 of them saw it or 25 of them saw it and the other one saw something similar to it, and then maybe another 20 saw something but didn't know what it was, and maybe another 20 didn't see it at all but just were in the rooms where kids were saying they saw either something or a lot of something and went along with it. You know, like I'm sure the truth, as always, is somewhere on that scale, and I just feel like I have less of an ability to judge right now than I have like the desire to just be like, I want to see all of the kids and their youngest and their oldest and I didn't talk about it.
I didn't mean to imply that like anyone is not being truthful about it.
Yeah.
I just meant like, because there are some of those inconsistencies in the story, it makes it more interesting to me because I have even less of an idea of what maybe happened that day then.
Sure.
And maybe it's something, I don't know. I always come back to like, if there's life elsewhere and if it is also here, it probably doesn't look and act like us.
Yeah.
And we may not even recognize it as such.
Sure.
And how would our brains even process a moment like that?
Sure.
So is any one of those descriptions actually accurate? Is it a combination of some of them? Is it our senses just trying to deal with something that they can't totally take in?
Is it a higher intelligence form's way of manifesting a physical presence
in a way that's somewhat palatable to us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That wouldn't just literally shatter our craniums.
Or that we wouldn't notice at all.
Yeah,
you
right.
know? Like that, I don't know why we would even necessarily have to be aware of a higher form of life, you know?
Yeah.
Is an ant aware of human beings?
No.
Probably not.
Or not in the way that even remotely,
right?
You know? Yeah. I don't know. I definitely see what you're saying. I just also, I'm inclined to be, I mean, we are generally pretty skeptical on the show, I would say. Not skeptical, but I would say, well, I would say we bring a healthy degree of skepticism to things,
and an unhealthy degree of non-skepticist weird shit.
Every once in a while. Yeah. I mean, we talk about stuff that we're skeptical about and still talk about it anyway. But
yeah,
I guess what I'm trying to say is like, in my generally like pretty skeptical mind, I'm pretty fascinated by what is out there. And this, like, you know, like you were saying in the interview, we don't have many of these or any of these.
Yeah.
Like, I'm reminded of like the Phoenix Lights and like a couple other ones, but none of them
Phoenix Lights isn't even in the same class though.
No, it's not.
It's lights
right.
in the sky.
Right. This is like daytime in a field.
It was 10:30 in the morning.
Right. And even with the inconsistencies, I'm still inclined to be less skeptical about this for some reason. You know, the other thing too that we talked about that is really interesting to me is the whole idea that, you know, these kids don't have anything to gain by talking about this or by maintaining a 20-year long story about something that happened to them in the fucking elementary school playground. You know, like they don't have anything to gain from maintaining that story for 20 years. And in the newest trailer on their Indiegogo and on their website and stuff, you see these kids being like, yeah, like the one quote to me was fantastic. The one kid said, if I could relive one moment in my entire life, it would be that moment. And he's like a 30-year-old dude or like 32-year-old
it was
dude.
Elementary school, so they're all between 6 and 12, and it was 23 years ago now, so they're all in their late 20s
Early
to
30s
to mid 30s. Yeah.
And like that says a lot to me. Like, as much as that one girl saying it flickers in and out, like, says something that a guy saying, if I could relive a single moment in my entire life, it would be that moment. Like, that also says a lot to me too. And I don't know. I mean, maybe the brain can build up at a level of importance around an event after the fact.
For sure.
But to have so many of them have to place a similar level of importance on it, that to me seems grander in a way.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say that I don't. I mean, I'm with Randall in that, like, something definitely happened that day.
Yeah. You're just more inclined to say I don't know what that was, or
exactly,
or what they said it was might not have necessarily been what it was, but it was just the best representation of what they could say it was. Yeah,
and I think a lot of those other possibilities are also very interesting and worth looking into. And when we were talking about, like, why this stuff is so fringe and not taken seriously a lot of the time, and not covered in mainstream media and stuff, I think a lot of that stigma comes from the fact that people, rather than coming to the table with, I saw this thing and I don't know what it is, can you help me figure it out?
Yeah.
People come to the table with, I saw an alien.
I figured it out. Yeah.
Yeah. And my reaction to that is always like, how the fuck would you know?
Yeah.
That may sound, and maybe is, like, belittling in a way, but at the same time, you're not going to have any credibility by saying you know exactly what happened, because there's no way that you could. If you saw an alien in that moment, there's no way that you could have a complete understanding of what just happened.
Sure, but I also think it's like, it's also less our job I think it's more our job to let people have their observation. Like, whatever you believe your observation to fully be, like, I give that to people because I'm not in a place to challenge that as specifically as you are able to say, look, I can tell you what I saw. And I'm not saying I know what I saw, but I can tell you what I saw.
I just think it's always more interesting, and it will be taken more seriously if you can come to the table with, I saw something that I can't explain.
Right.
And I don't know what that was.
Sure.
Here is, in an objective way, what I saw or heard or experienced.
Yeah.
And when you come to the table with, it's an alien over and over and over again, and you're wrong over and over and over again, then people stop listening.
Well, and I think that's really honestly the problem with the Stephen Greer stuff is so much of his documentaries are, the first half is people saying, I don't know what I saw, it was pretty weird. And then the second half of all his documentaries are, it's a global energy conspiracy theory for the aliens from, and you're like,
and then
right,
at that point I can just go, Steve, no, it's not.
And that's what I really liked about...
I'm done with that guy.
Right. And that's what I really liked about Randall when he was like, it's no bullshit. We're not putting a bunch of special effects in here. Whenever he was like, it's about people. Mm-hmm. And I really love that angle. I don't think that I've seen anyone do a UFO documentary that really focuses on the people and the experiences they had and the way that they recite their experience. Yeah. And that's one of the things for me that is most exciting about this story, because it's not like... and then we're going to animate a spaceship flying through the sky, and it's going to be, it's just about people saying, this is what happened to me, and it's crazy, and I wish I could see it again, and it's made me feel crazy for a while, but also, like, I know what I saw, or I know what I think I saw. Mm-hmm. And
or I don't, but here's how it affected me anyway.
Yeah, or I don't, but I can at least give you, like, an approximation that makes the most sense to me. That all to me is like a really exciting angle to tell the story. And I think to the point that we also talked about in the interview, I think that's also what makes this most able to kind of infiltrate the public mind a little bit more. Yeah. It's less staking a claim on what something is, as much as it is saying, hey, look, like, and I think he even Randall even talks about it in the interview, the whole thing of, like, it's a Pulitzer Prize winning BBC correspondent, and John Mack was the one that won the Pulitzer Prize, right? Yeah. John Mack won a Pulitzer Prize, and he investigated it, and the BBC guy was a war reporter, and, like, there are enough things that sort of bolster the credibility and, like, certify this story.
Some very
in a way.
Serious people took it very seriously.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that I think is a really great baseline for this story, and then the additional layer of interest comes in the fact that he's telling it from, like, a less glamorous and more human.
Yeah. All right.
We're pumped to see it. Let's all go to arielphenomenon.com and give them dollars so we can see it and we can have some of our questions answered.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. You guys can find, again, that Indiegogo on their website in our show notes and on the website at whatifpodcast.com. As always, if you want to send us a note, we got like more emails than we've ever gotten last week because we told you guys we respond to emails and we got like 30 emails
and
last week.
Some of y'all called me on it and just sent me emails just to see if I'd reply to them, and I did.
And we did. Yeah, Spencer been monitoring that email inbox. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on the Ariel Phenomenon or the documentary, or you want to suggest a show, or you want to goof on us, it's hi at whatifpodcast.com. Check out the website at whatifpodcast.com, and you can also get cool gifts from us if you go on Twitter at whatifpod.
Cool gifts?
Yeah, we'll send you
GIFs.
.gifs.
Graphics interchange formats.
Yes, we don't say GIF around here because people who say GIF are crazy.
I thought you said like gifts, as in presents. Like
we send you Twitter
things.
presents.
Yeah. Hey, did you give that dude his foghorn leghorn impression?
I'll say, no, I did not. Is that close enough? Did I get it?
Lying son of a bitch.
I gave it to him. Jose. That's it, man. That's what you're getting. All right?
All right. We'll see y'all next week.
We love you.
We'll be back next week with another episode of the What If Podcast. Learn more at www.whatifpodcast.com.